Good morning, everyone. We welcome you all to the second webinar of the day. In this webinar, we will deliberate upon the National Education Policy 2020, which was announced by the Ministry of Education earlier this year. The success of this multifaceted
Good morning,
policy on the
everyone.
Indian
We
education
welcome you
system
all to the
depends
second
on its
webinar of the day.
implementation.
In
The
this
webinar will highlight the tenets of National Education Policy 2020 and its implications. Before introducing, I would request all the panelists to kindly switch on their camera. Our first panelist for this webinar would be Dr. Poonam Batra. Dr. Poonam Batra is India's leading elementary and teacher education academics with over 25 years of experience in teaching, research, training, management, and consultancy. A professor of education at University of Delhi, she has co-created the framework for the Bachelor of Elementary Education and awarded with the prestigious National Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship for research on teacher education and social change. Professor Batra has also co-authored a number of key educational policy documents. We welcome you, ma'am. Next, we have with us Dr. Payal Nagpal. Dr. Payal Nagpal holds a PhD degree and is currently teaching English literature at Janki Devi Memorial College, Delhi University. A theatre person and literary critic, she has authored books and presented papers in national and international conferences. Greetings, ma'am. Further, we have Shashank Pandey. Mr. Shashank Pandey is a social entrepreneur with more than 10 years of experience in building and implementing edtech solutions across 16 states of India. He co-founded Convegenius, an edtech social enterprise with a vision of making quality education in India. Convegenius is currently impacting 5 million students through a teacher-facilitated personalized and adaptive learning platform. Welcome, sir. Next, I would invite Dr. Nakul Gupta. Dr. Nakul Gupta is an engineering graduate from MD University, Rohtak, with a PhD from Management Development Institute. He is currently working as an assistant professor and coordinator in the same. Dr. Nakul Gupta has been decorated with many national and international awards of merit, like the International Climate Champion 2009 and Brightest Young Climate Leader 2010. Selected by the Google to be a part of User Summit and Earth Engine Mini Summit, he has also been selected by UNICEF to be a mentor for blockchain and financial inclusion events called Surge. We welcome you, sir. Now, I would like to invite the moderator for this webinar, Ms. Kanika S. Kovi, Vice Principal DPS Rohini. She has a teaching experience of almost 30 years and is an MA English topper from Calcutta University. Ms. Kovi considers herself a scholar gypsy who loves to learn. Passionate about experiential, value-based learning, she has spoken and written about the need for extensive teacher capacity building. Awarded by NPSC, she has been the ISA coordinator for BCL, pilot project leader for Ramakrishna Mission's Awakened Citizen program, and UNESCO's Action for Equality program in our school. We welcome you all. I request Ms. Kanika S. Govi to initiate the webinar.
Thank you, Shreya, and welcome all of you. Dr. Batra, if you could have your video on. Dr. Nagpal, Dr. Gupta. It's easier to have a conversation, a dialogue when one can see each other. Good morning and welcome. And I'm so glad and privileged to have to host this very august panel. And each one of you are you have achieved so much in your own area that I wish we could have a one-to-one dialogue separately for the purpose of really unfolding and unfurling the kind of experiences that you have to share. Nevertheless, let us begin with the panel discussion. Dr. Payal Nagpal and Dr. Nakul Gupta, I'm not able to see you. Have you switched on your cameras?
Yes.
Okay.
My camera's on. I don't know. I
Okay.
can see myself in the kind
Yeah,
of.
I can see you now. I can see you now. It's good not to miss out on all the pretty faces. Right. Uh, right. I think for when we talk about 2020, there are three mysteries that face us. At least that's how I perceive it. The first mystery, of course, is about how COVID-19 began. We still haven't got the answer to that. There are a lot of theories, a lot of perceptions, and the WhatsApp University continues to belch out many more theories. The second mystery was, of course, about Sushant Singh Rajput's death. Murder or mystery, we still don't know. And I think the third mystery is NEP 2020. Though the policy has been rolled out with a lot of details, somehow all the stakeholders are very confused about what it entails, what it means, and what lies in it for all the stakeholders. So that's how it was important that we take up this issue. Here we will move with this panel with the assumption that all of the audience have at least have an overview of what the NEP 2020 is all about. Because here we are not going to take up each tenet of NEP. It is outside the purview of this panel, and that would require, I suppose, a week-long panel discussion to do that. Having said that, my first question is, we call it the new education policy. An education policy which has taken form after almost 34 years. So I assume this must have been compiled bit by bit over the last 34 years, and that is how it has taken so long to take birth in 2020. Dr. Batra, my first question is to you, that how new is the new education policy?
Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all, to participate in this discussion and to actually answer your question. Firstly, I must say that actually it's called the National Education Policy and not the New Education Policy. And the 1986 policy was called the National Policy on Education, and that's why it was called NPE, and this is NEP. That's just a nomenclature. But certainly it is new. And it is new even when we, had the 1986 policy. That time was called the new policy because it was coming after 20 years. Now, this one is relatively coming, let's say, even after a longer gap, about 32 years, even though the 86 was revised in 92 based on the Ramamurthy review of the 86 policy in 1990, although there wasn't much of a change because the same political regime came to power. Now, firstly, we must understand that any education policy and the educational practice that emerges from there is actually led by this ideology of the powers in the center. So the state has a very large role to play in shaping policy and therefore shaping educational practice. So what is new about this policy is actually several things which are couched in very interesting positive vocabularies and terminologies, but we need to examine the subtext to really understand the newness of it and what its implications will be for us as a country, as children, as teachers, as educators, and professionals. So, my first submission would be that it is a policy that is looking at once at four major elements. One, the academic element; second, the administrative element; third, regulation; fourth, funding. And in terms of all these, it is setting up national level bodies that will literally bring about what has been the major slogan of this government is one nation, one kind of everything. So there is an attempt to uniformize not only regulatory procedures, which may not be a bad thing to do because we do need good regulation, and to regularize accreditation, which is also fine, unless, of course, we are able to take into account local specificities, regional specificities, and the diversity of the country. But nowhere in this policy is even the term diversity mentioned in any meaningful way. The third is funding. Now, funding is actually at the moment happening through various measures in schools and in colleges, higher education centers. But they're proposing a structure that will regulate that funding very centrally. And in fact, the role of the political executive is very large in this new, and that is the newness of the policy, which is disturbing. Till now, we've had an education policy with very high bureaucratic interventions possible and bureaucratic control. Today, the bureaucratic control is going to shake hands with the political executive. And the politician is going to have a much bigger say in the education of this country, which is, I think, disturbing, and we must look at it very carefully. The other aspect is that very rightly, the policy talks of learning crisis. No doubt that several of our national surveys done by either NCRT or by the education initiatives or ASAR, Pratham, etc., are telling us that our children are not really learning very well and that there are lots of major gaps in very basic elementary literacies of numeracy and reading, writing, etc. So, in that sense, this is a valid concern of the policy, and the newness of it is the thrust that it tries to place on this. But the problem with the policy's thrust is that it seems to be suggesting, and this has to be understood when you read the 66-page document along with the 400-page document of the 2019 draft that preceded this, and it's trying to actually push all the children who are not able to learn into a frame of calling it the bulk of remedial kind of children, which means that the onus of learning or the onus of failing is being pushed onto the child as if there is some kind of a lack in the child, and the onus of enabling that lack to be fulfilled is being pushed on to the community. So, for example, the policy suggests that we will have socio-economically disadvantaged groups, which is one basket in which there'll be not only disabled, not only SC, ST, OBC, but all women, migrant children, minorities, everybody is in one basket. So, firstly, when we put it in one basket, the policy is defying and violating the constitutionally mandated categories, which are SC, ST, OBC. Women is not a mandated category. Minorities is not a mandated category. Although, yes, we do need policy redressal mechanisms for those disadvantaged sections of our society. But by doing that, it's also suggesting that we will have special education zones for each of these SEDG communities. Now, that also means that the policy is suggesting measures which are going to be different for the underprivileged and measures which are going to be different for the privileged. So, I see the newness of this policy as an attempt to segregate the education system by way of segregated educational measures for the privileged and those for the underprivileged. And that newness is very disturbing. The
Right,
second aspect,
right.
yes,
Poonam, Dr. Batra, we'll come back to you.
sure,
I just want to take the opinion of the other panelists on this newness.
yeah.
Dr. Batra has said that this newness is quite disturbing. Uh, from the other end of the spectrum now, because Dr. Batra is very involved with elementary education. So, Dr. Nagpal, I would like you to comment on this from the other end of the spectrum. How do you look at this? Do you find that the newness is welcome? Has it been worth the wait? Dr. Nagpal?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ms. Govi, for inviting me for this panel discussion. And I think what Professor Batra was also, she's a specialist in education. So I think she has pointed out very correctly that there are fundamental problems with, the national education policy. But I will speak a little bit about some takeaways from the policy. And I will also speak because, I'm going to be familiar more with the higher education sector than with, education at the school level. Point that not depend
Uh,
policy event
I think,
scope within the policy. Uh, am I audible? Is there a
yeah, there was a bit of a disturbance in between. Now it's okay.
All right. So, I think one of the basic takeaways is that, it lays a lot of stress on what it calls, kind of looking at the higher education sector and, instilling constitutional values. I can hear some disturbance. Is there an issue with the audio? I can't make out.
There's a bit of lagging from
Think,
your end.
not Can we request people maybe who are not speaking to mute because I think that's causing.
Yeah. I think we'll switch on the switch off the camera also. That might help.
Dr. Nagpal, could you please unmute yourself?
Yes, I've just unmuted myself. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is better. So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
was Yes. So I was just saying that there are some fundamental takeaways also from this policy, and I'm just going to talk very briefly about two or three important things. One, the stress on constitutional values, and I think we need to, if it has been used in the policy, I think these values in a sense are implemented. The second aspect is I think we have now moved, if we really speaking go back in time, look at our grandparents generation, I think they were three different languages, right? So apart from let's say English, and now it's just come down to practically being bilingual, which is also not the situation in some cases. So I think it gives you an opportunity to actually and look at it in terms of language alone. It brings with it a certain cultural, back has created of a multidisciplinary. In the last 10 years, we've been talking about an interdisciplinary approach. From an interdisciplinary approach, we have now moved into a multidisciplinary situation where we are looking in the higher education sector, at least we are looking at the possibility of kind of allowing the students to find their feet, and to understand what it is that they want to do, and of creating more opportunities so that, if they want to kind of branch out into research, they can do that. If they want to move into, let's say, a vocational career, they can think about that. So there is, and I think this somehow also, I would like to mention that at the college level, what we have is called the choice based credit system at the present moment, which brought in two things. One, the element of choice, and the second, credits being allocated to students for the courses that they take up. So I think this is something that has been kind of developed further. Where I agree that there are concerns, policy, a lot is going to depend on the way in which it is implemented. Are we, are we able to kind of pick up the correct things from the policy and build it up in a manner that our existing system kind of can be developed into a more robust and a system that provides, I think, greater choice to the students. I think that would be, a very good takeaway from the policy.
Thank you, Dr. Payal. I think that makes that gives a little perspective which is quite positive. We are quite looking forward to as far as higher education is concerned, and flexibility is what you're talking about. And do you think I'll put another question to you, Dr. Payal? Dr. Batra has just talked about, increasing the gap between the privileged and the not so privileged. So do you see this impacting higher education in any way?
Well, at the moment, I think the policy in its existing form does not kind of, really state anything about it. So my assumption, and I'm just saying this is an individual opinion, my assumption is that, we already have a proper reservation system in place. And so we obviously continue with that reservation system, and giving equal opportunities to everybody, and, kind of bringing everybody on the, really speaking, same level, and kind of, ensure that there are opportunities that are given to everyone.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. With this, I move to you, Mr. Shashank Pandey. I would request you that you take half a minute and share with the audience the kind of work that you do.
Sure. So I think I have been trying to, enable the use of technology in teaching and learning, so that ultimately the learning is very, very personalized for our students. Uh, so I set up Convigenius about 8 years back, and as a social enterprise, and we work with low profit schools and government schools in multiple states. We also work with state governments directly to use technology at multiple levels to improve student learning outcomes. So this is what we do, and I'm very optimistic about the new education policy, because it allows the tech to democratize a lot of things in the education space.
Right. Interesting. So, if you could just elaborate on that, how do you think you are also very positive about the new education policy? So, how do you feel that it is? You feel, as you said, it will democratize. So, you feel it is going to bridge the gap that exists, or will it widen the gap? Because right now, Mr. Pandey, what we see, even we have students which are from the economically weaker backgrounds. And it has been quite an uphill task for the school to take care of these 25% students with their gadgets and data and things like that. And especially in houses where there are 3 to 4 children, school going children, it is an uphill task indeed. So how do you think, then in spite of this, what makes you feel that, we can have a level playing field for everybody?
I think it all starts from how are we measuring learning? I think the NEP at one end is trying to integrate education end to end. For example, the 5+3+3+4 system integrates preschool to primary, primary to secondary, secondary to then higher education through a common test for entrance in colleges. And at one end it's integrated. At the other end, it is also proposing certain formal assessments at multiple levels. For example, it is proposing assessments at grade 3, 5, 8. It's also proposing assessments for learning, not assessments of learning. So when assessments happen like a very normal thing, right? I mean, when I was a student in college 10 years back, I mean, we used to align our studies and focus and everything around the exams, around the marks. But when you move the conversation away from marks to competencies, when assessment happen, let's say every month, every week, like they're having fun, for example, uh, and with that you get a lot of evidence on how learning happens, even for economically weaker students, and that automatically shapes up a lot of things in the schooling system, because you have evidence every month about children coming from different backgrounds. That automatically enables a system. That is what I have been seeing in the 5,000 schools there where we work directly. That if you give evidence at regular intervals to a teacher, to a parent, I think it is possible to align everybody towards the common goal of making the child move forward.
Right. Thank you. Can we have Dr. Gupta on board now, please? And if you could share your perspective on the newness of NEP.
Okay. First and foremost, thank you, Kanika ma'am, and thank you, Suha ma'am, for inviting. It's pleasure to be back to the TPS Rohini community. Feels like yesterday. Now,
Yes, Nakul is actually our ex-student also, Dr. Nakul. I won't be able to call you Dr. Nakul Gupta.
no, no,
I
ma'am.
will
Please
have
call me
to
Nakul.
keep to the first name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to take it ahead, I think I would like to start with addressing the point that you made, that is the gap widening. So I think, see, as a policy maker in my current role, I work a lot with the Ministry of Education as well as Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Skill Development. What happens is you need to understand that policy makers give a strategic direction in wherein different stakeholders have to take a particular thing ahead. Now, herein it's education. So what Dr. Batra and what Dr. Payal and Dr. Nagpal, sorry, and what Shashank have mentioned, it's perfectly right. But we also need to understand it from a larger picture, that uh, having a nation of 1.3 billion people and a policy wherein the gross enrollment ratio is actually decreasing as we move ahead, we progress from grade 3 to 5 to 8. What is happening is that national education policy is trying to address the delta in the dropouts. So how it is doing this thing is by bringing together three or four different elements. One is inclusivity, the other is modularity, the third is technology, and the fourth is financial support. Now, financial support doesn't happen just from government, and I'm going from back, and I'll come back to the inclusivity part. Financial support happens with both national and international partners, wherein national can be split into, I'm right now talking about the state instruments, be it central government, be it state government, and be it special bodies which are made. Then we have funding agencies, and then we have edtech entrepreneurs like Shashank and others. Now, together, they are there to help in what we call as the financial capital. Then we come to the infrastructure capital. That's what NEP is now doing. Infrastructure doesn't here only means specifically about the physical infrastructure, but we are also talking about the cognitive infrastructure, the knowledge infrastructure, as well as the people infrastructure. See, training the people who are actually going to shape the students who are going to be the future of our country and the globe, if you have to say, this is an important element of NEP which has been well addressed. How it is implemented on the grassroots level is something we can debate and discuss, but that is something that we should be really cognizant of. And then comes the knowledge capital per se, right? So it's infrastructure, finance, knowledge, inclusivity. If you look at the 66-page document which was being mentioned, which has been recently ratified in July 2020, now you'll have a look, and one will be very careful to even note that special focus has been made to things which were erstwhile neglected. And that is why, to be very honest, both personally and I mean, in my professional opinion, what I see is that NEP is a guiding policy for a lot of other triggered policy changes which are going to follow in the next decade and a half. Now, it is not only just an inward looking policy, but it is also an outward looking policy, because in India, we look at DICE data and data which is collected using NSSO to gauge how perhaps we are doing in terms of education. But if we look at international comparable standards, we have the PISA assessments, we have several other things. Now, these are directly linked with what exactly Shashank said, that we are going to assess for learning rather than assessing learning. And that is something that NEP has actually ignited. Now, how far this ignition is going to last totally depends on the stakeholders which are involved. So, therefore, personally, I think it is a very welcome step. And yes, one important thing which I forgot was the modularity. Now, a lot of times when you look at this widening gap of the haves and the have-nots, and particularly in a family, if you're talking about, let's say, an economically not so good, having 3 to 4 people who are actually going to study, a lot of times resource crunch is something which basically forces them to prioritize who will get to learn and who will not get to learn. But if we have a modular part wherein we can come in the education system, leave it, and then rejoin it again where we have left, is something which is very important. So I might have started something which was there at a K-12 level. Now, because of some personal emergency, I have to forego that particular thing at maybe 5 plus 3 plus 3 at level. Now, there is an option that I can join where I actually had left, because it is well accepted, well drafted, and is part of a system. I might not join a school, I might join an educational or an accredited educational partner, but my educational journey is paused, it's not stopped. And this is what modularity brings into the picture. Second thing is that it also offers a lot of, so to say, options to a lot of people in terms of where to get the learning from and in what manner, right? So therefore, rather than just following one common perspective towards things, you can actually decide what you have to learn and from where you have to learn. And I think that is a very welcome step. And we are going ahead, equaling and maybe even spearheading this thing, particularly the K-12 education and our pre-steps towards higher education globally. I think this is a brilliant step.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Nakul. Before I let you off, something which I've been wondering about, maybe we'll start from your end of the spectrum here. There has been a lot of debate and concern among the teaching community, among the all the stakeholders, in fact, this whole idea of teaching in the mother tongue. Now, how do you think that impacts the kind of positivity that you're looking at? Employability.
I think, ma'am, to be very honest, it's a double-edged sword, if I have to put it this way. When we talk about teaching in mother tongue, see what happens is it is scientifically proven that a child learns better, particularly the STEM part, if he or she is taught in the mother tongue. But that should be used to the advantage, not to maybe, I mean, let's say, setting boundaries. Now, what I mean by this is that if, let's say, we are overhyping or we are over glamorizing the mother tongue initiative, particularly when we are transitioning from the, let's say, K-12 education to the higher education, what happens is we are restricting on collaborating at an international level. Now, So I'll just elaborate on this thing. See, if a person is more comfortable in talking or maybe interacting or expressing oneself in the mother tongue, it might sometimes take a toll on their ability to have or establish a common platform or a ground when communicating and interacting with people from different geographies. And herein I mean international geographies, because see, the world is shrinking with given the way ICT is going. It is very important that we have as many common grounds to interact, think, collaborate, co-work, tinker, co-create as much as it's possible. So I think taking the pros of learning and development by being taught in mother tongue should be, let's say, much more focused on the foundational level. And once, and maybe till the middle school level, once that is done, then it could be optional, given the fact that if somebody wants to do this thing, it's absolutely fine. If not, it should not be coming as a burden, because then that might restrict the global outlook and outreach of and a holistic development of the student. So that's what I have to say, particularly about teaching mother tongue in HEIs and transitioning from K-12 to HEIs.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Shashank Pandey, considering the numbers that you deal with, and plus you're talking about EdTech. So, are you going to develop EdTech in various regional languages to reach out? Have you already developed them? How do you plan to address this whole issue of mother tongue teaching?
Yeah, so our platform is actually available in 10 Indian languages. Uh, and so, and when that happens, right? So, as Nakul said, right, what we are seeing is every state is like a mini India, because every state has their own language. Uh, and I think I've been to schools where there are more than one languages, basically. Because, for example, in some areas of Chhattisgarh or Orissa where we work, I mean, there are different dialects around Hindi as well. So it becomes, nearly impossible for a teacher to articulate any concept in so many languages. So India is such a diverse country that this is always an issue. I totally agree with Nakul that you know, I mean, because we don't have a one common language, right? If we had one common language, one common curriculum, it would have been easy. But because there are so many languages, it reduces that interoperability. The world is shrinking. We need to integrate more. You know, uh, we don't see a lot of collaborations happening between institutions in Punjab and institutions in Tamil Nadu, for example, because there is that language barrier today.
Right. Absolutely.
But we have used edtech uh, in regional languages. That has worked for us. In fact, that has helped us penetrate much faster than most of the other edtech solutions. But I always try to find a balance where children also learn English so that they are ready for the global market.
Right. Right.
English
Okay.
cannot be ignored as a foundational. When government say foundational literacy, they generally mean the local language. I think maybe in the next 5 years or so, English should also be a part of the financial foundational literacy mission of the government.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. That really gives us, it is kind of echoing what I was saying. A lot of teaching community is actually worried about it. Parents are worried about it. And I know parents who have transferable jobs are worried about it. That, once they move from one state to the other, one region to the other, how do the children cope up? Apart from other, issues of adapting to a new environment, a new third language now to be taught in a different medium of instruction is going to be very, very challenging. Dr. Batra, what would be your take on this? Yes, we know that scientifically speaking, it is mother tongue is the best way to teach a child. But when it comes to a country like ours, I mean, we can argue that in Finland they all speak Finnish and they're taught in Finnish and they don't know English and they're doing so well. But then, can we all dream of being a Finland or a Singapore, where their own language is primary and English is secondary to everything else.
Yes, I think the language issue is pretty critical. I mean, the policy suggestion of having mother tongue and then giving it sort of leaving it open and saying, wherever possible is okay. My particular submission will be that a very young child learns best in his or her mother tongue. And therefore, that's an important idea. But what is a mother tongue for the child of India that lives, in such a vast, diverse country? So we can't even pin and say this is the mother tongue or this is the first language. That is the challenge we have. But wherever possible, for example, for tribal children, we never talk about the tribal languages as mother tongue. Why don't we do that? So it is a challenging thing. This, in fact, brings me to the point that curriculum therefore cannot be uniform because the language itself is so diverse. Curriculum is a deliberative act. It should be contextualized. This policy is trying to homogenize identities by bringing in a uniform curriculum, even at the higher education level. That is why it's proposing a 4-year integrated B.Ed for the whole country. I think that's a crazy idea. We need to address the contextual diversity of this country and allow people to develop curriculum that is suited to their needs and concerns as well. So, for example, when we talk about assessment for learning, which is a very important point flagged by two speakers, but can you ever have assessment for learning by big data banks or by PISAs and high stakes testing? Assessment for learning can only happen by the teacher because the teacher will be able to then tweak her pedagogy or tweak the curriculum in order to enable learning. Otherwise, all that is happening in big scale testing is only assessment of learning. This is a playing with semantics. And I think NEP is one document. It's a classic example of a document, a policy document that actually plays with language. It couches a whole lot of hidden agenda under the garb of very progressive terminology. And yes, you're absolutely right, Nakul, that NEP is actually going to lay out the changes that we are looking at forward in this country if this NEP actually pans out. Let me tell you, does the NEP talk about RTE? No, it doesn't. We have a central legislation. It talks of RTE only as something that happened in the past. And with three critical amendments, it's already done away with the RTE. And in the 66-page document, the NEP says RTE restrictions of norms of schools will be made less restrictive. That means one teacher schools like the Ekal Vidyalayas will also be allowed to come into the system. So many states have worked so hard over the years to get rid of one teacher schools, to actually bring in schools with enough number of teachers. Now we are going to give them a green signal and say one teacher schools are fine. And constitutional values, while I may agree with Payal that that is mentioned in the policy and that's a very important thing, but the policy frame itself is anti-constitutional. So how are you going to teach constitutional values in a system that is not adhering to the constitutional values of equity and social justice? So my submission is actually that the digital, and we are facing it right now, we faced glitches on Microsoft Team. We faced glitches sitting in the capital of the country. And can we expect technology to reach everywhere to our children? We've seen it what's happening in the pandemic. Even a state like Kerala, for example, has only 51 households with technology access for digital learning. And in the rural households, it's even less than that, about 30 or something percent. Now, how can we think of the digital learning platform, which is being pushed through the pandemic and put into the NEP 2020 to become a panacea of all the ills of education? We've been facing this problem. The funny thing is that today, with the digital platform that we are all working with, we're actually saying, please show us your face. And we are calling it face to face learning. Where have we reached? Is it possible to do any meaningful learning on a digital platform when there is no access, when economic inequities, like ma'am, you pointed out in DPS, how struggling it is for you to deal with the EWS children who are unable to have these gadgets in their homes. And if one of them has it, the other child is left without it. So it's a very, very tough proposition for us to look at digital divide as something that we can bridge and overcome. The UP state minister says that 3.5 million children actually work on digital platforms out of 18 million children. And the NEP says we will bridge that digital divide. I think what P. Sainath calls it, he calls it digital partition. And we are introducing new forms of exclusion, new forms of inequities in this country. There is 1 million teacher vacancy in this country. How will we address that? The NEP is mum about it. The NEP simply says, yes, vacancies will be filled. How? You're not even acknowledging RTE. How are you going to fill those vacancies? And I personally think that it's very important for us to understand the NEP is pushing what is its own duty. That is the duty of the state to provide equitable quality education. It is pushing it on to the community and saying we'll have volunteers, we'll have master instructors from the community, and we have teachers who will be shared within different schools. I mean, how is that possible? Will you share your teachers with another school? Will it be possible to do that? So what NEP is pushing is actually pushing the onus of learning onto the child, onto the community, when it should be the duty of the state as per our constitutional commitment. And today already we have what Ambanis and Adanis have been saying, and unemployable higher education graduates. Well, how are you going to make them employable? By giving them exit points after 1 year. You give them a certification, will they become employable? You give them another 2 years. All these ideas of choice sound very good. They are wonderful ideas. But for God's sake, we have to actually see how they interface with our existing society, which is only becoming more and more inequitous as we are going into the path of neoliberal capitalized monopolies, which are actually taking the shape of crony capitalism. I think we need to look at that larger system itself rather than a very glorified theoretical understanding of what education can be.
Thank you, Dr. Batra. Your passion is absolutely contagious, and thank you for that. At this juncture, Rajshri, can I request you to just switch on the video? I just want to share a video clipping, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, but nevertheless, for the sake of everybody's ease of understanding, I would like to have that played. Rajshri, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please play that? Please include the audio.
I just wanted to create a learning environment for every student that could spark their curiosity and make them innovative problem solvers so that they could contribute to the community. So Palitavadi is mostly known for farming. So we can see that all of them are below poverty level parents. The boys are actually lending the helping hands to their parents. Girls' education is not given that much importance. So education is not a priority. I still remember the day one when I saw the school building and I saw that this is like indifference of a parents looking at the education. So I started to interact with the parents. I learned their language, participated in their events. So it was like being a member of their community.
परंतु ज्यावेळेस डिसले सर आले त्यावेळेस पासून काय झालं की एक विद्यार्थ्यांना प्रेरणा मिळाली की आपण शाळेमध्ये येऊन शिकलं पाहिजे. पालकांनी त्यामुळं काय केलं की जास्तीत जास्त विद्यार्थ्यांना शाळेमध्ये जास्त वेळ कसे राहतील याकडे लक्ष दिलं.
Even though I'm teaching to 12 and 13 students in a class, but everyone is learning at their own pace. I have made some QR codes on the each and every textbook. So when the students scan those QR codes, he or she gets the personalized and well curated content for himself. Considering his style of learning, I change the content at the back end. So this is how I make their learning personalized. They can challenge themselves. They are not competitors of others. Technology is helping me to bridge that gap between students living in villages and students in cities. Schools are closed, but still our teaching learning process is going on. Right now, I'm running my online classes from my home. We're using some video conferencing software. So, where my students could join my classes, I just make sure that they are achieving the learning outcomes of a respective class at the end of the every year.
मोबाईलवरती क्लास घेत होतो, व्हिडिओ कॉलवरनं आम्ही शिकत होतो. खेळतो, मोबाईलवरचा अभ्यास करतो, सरांनी दिलेली स्वाध्याय पत्रिका सोडवतो.
The major issues is girls getting married at the age of 12 and 13. Girls are not considered to be contributing to the family to change the status. I'm proud to say that in last 10 years, that culture of getting married early age was now completely banned, and I'm very happy to stop that tradition.
अनेक मुलींचे तर लहान वयात लग्न लावायचे, पण मी आई वडील व रणजित सरांची आभारी आहे. त्यांनी आम्हा मुलींना एक आत्मविश्वास दिला.
Girls' education is more than just getting them in the schools. It's more about feeling safe in the community, in the society. I'm really enjoying my job. I'm being a teacher. Now it's like it's my soul. It's my aim of life. Teachers are actually catalysts that can change the society, that can really make the world a much better place that the students would like to live.
Right. Thank you, Rajshri. Hope you enjoyed the video. The reason I wanted to share this one is this gentleman, Mr. Ranjit, has got the Global Teacher Award 2020. And this is the first time that an Indian teacher has received this award. Why I wanted to share this video was because when Dr. Batra said the onus of learning lies on the student with the new NEP. I really wanted to get your views, of the panel's views, on is it really the onus is really on the student, or has the onus been shifted completely on the teacher now? Because this is what the video conveys to me, that the teacher has to be the innovator, the problem solver, the creative one, to find ways and means to overcome all the hurdles, all the problems. And moreover, when we talk about one size not fitting all, the current education system that we have, whether it is the CBSE or the state boards, they have also, in a way, I feel, just been suffering from a colonial hangover, and we have been just creating these assembly line workers, and the individual thinker, the problem solver, the creative child has been suppressed somewhere. So, in this, I would like to know, uh, Dr. Nagpal, that what do you think is going to be the role of the teacher in this entire exercise?
Uh, See, under the NEP, the pedagogy is going to change completely. So, where see it can't be a unifocal sort of thing where it's either the onus is either on the student or it is on the teacher. It's not like that, and it's always dialogic in that sense. For us, one of the things I think the pandemic has taught us very clearly is that we cannot shift to a completely online mode. That's really speaking not possible. And when we speak about blended learning, how blended is that learning going to be? What element is going to be the tech element? Because one thing is quite clear, be it the students or the teachers, we need our classrooms. We need to be back there. And the students need their teachers there. Right? So that's
Dr. Nagpal, sorry to cut in, but this is a general perception about higher education institutions that students are seldom in their classes, or they walk in and walk out of their classes. So, does it really impact the classroom? Does it really impact? Because higher education, it seems, in our country at least, is more self directed, self motivated.
I'm sorry I didn't get the last part.
Yeah, I said that higher education tends to be more self-motivated, and students often choose to stay out of the classes. So therefore, does it really impact the pedagogy or a physical classroom?
So I'll just address this in a very very give a very simple answer to this. See, right up to I think pretty much all of the 90s and the first part of our entry into the 2000 the 21st century. There used to be a system where there was no internal assessment in colleges, and all of the 100 marks were actually given through the university examination. So no 25 marks actually given by the college. However, that changed, and 5 marks are given for attendance. So my joke on this is that it has brought the students back to the classroom, but totally for the wrong reasons. Students are now. I must share this that I teach in a women's college, and students are there in full, and there's full attendance. They're there all the time. So it's those 5 marks actually that have kind of brought the students back to the classroom. And according to me, that's really speaking not the correct reason. I think prior to this particular mode of assessment, when we had a very, very liberal, very, very flexible sort of system under which I also studied, I graduated from Hansraj, and it was like that. It depended on you. You enjoyed certain classes, and you could attend, let's say, a marathon class of 4 hours there and be present. And there were other classes that you decided to, for whatever reason, decided to stay away from. So yes, this was there, but it's been a while now, and the internal assessment system has brought the students back to the classroom. But I think the emphasis here, when we speak about the onus being on the student, here I think under the NEP, and I'm speaking from a position of engagement. I have absolutely, at the ideological level, I'm in complete agreement with what Professor Poonam Batra has said. But I'm just speaking, as I said, from a position of engagement. It's a policy that has now come to us. What can be my possible constitutionality being spelled out, and the framework really speaking, kind of diluting it. So I would say that when we really speaking look at what we can take away, I think the element of choice is one that is given to the student, where I think designing his career is something that is the onus of it is going to be more on the students in that case. But I think what we really need to keep, and that will again depend on how it is brought in and how it is implemented, how these courses are then going to be taught. Because with the NEP, one thing is certain, you need a new style of pedagogy. That much is clear. But I think what we must center the student that whether there is space for it or not, we have to create that space, I think. So I think if that is going to be our pivot, I think that is where the
Right.
if pivot, I think that
Okay. Uh, I think there's some disturbance there. Thank you, Dr. Nagpal. We've kind of almost reached the end of the hour, though there's so much to explore and so much to talk. But we'll just take 1 minute each for each speaker. And Nakul, we'll start with you. And how do you see, and what is it, how to overcome the roadblocks that we have talked about, and which is a major roadblock in the implementation of this policy, and how do you think we can overcome that? 1 minute,
Uh,
please.
yeah, sure. Thank you, ma'am. So I think, ma'am, two things herein are important. One is collaborative decision making, and the other is use of technology. And I think both of them should be targeted at what we call in education the two sigma problem, which basically means that when we give a student personalized education plus formative assessment together. Now, this basically helps in bringing about better learning results, which is on an average 2 sigma, that is 2 standard deviations better than an average class which was doing before it. Collaborative decision making between stakeholders, the government, international funding agencies, edtechs like Shashank, as well as existing educators and parents. Second is when we talk about technology. Now, see, technology helps a teacher to do multitasking. Technology is not there to replace a teacher, but to facilitate a teacher so that teacher is already a superhuman doing what they are. We want to make them a superhuman. So we are just amplifying their reach, we are amplifying their magnitude, and we are amplifying what is called their magic touch. Now, things like augmented reality, artificial intelligence, essentially are empowering teacher to help more people both quantitatively and qualitatively better. So I think a full blown use of technology, particularly emerging ones, and plus collaborative decision making with I think partnership which are very strategic, laser point focus involving most of these decision makers together is going to help us in better implementation and absorption of what NEP 2020 has basically ignited. So that's my bit about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Shashank Pandey.
Yeah, I think we were discussing about the digital divide. I
Yeah.
want to discuss about the digital union here. I'll
Okay.
so what I mean, as one of the panelists said, right? I mean, it's very difficult to reach out to EWS category students. What we have done in the last few months is basically use asynchronous methods to reach out to those students. Those students definitely don't have the devices to be online and attend live classes. But if you can just convert those live classes into very, very bite-sized asynchronous classes, maybe which can be accessed on WhatsApp, it is possible to have a inclusive way of making them learn. And over and above that, what we were able to achieve is basically a shared device habit in the communities for EWS students particularly. In the COVID era, what we are seeing is every device is being used by 3 children on an average. And we are talking about 70 lakh children that we impact today, which means the neighbors get together in the evening hours. They use WhatsApp to access content, and this content is the same content which teachers are pushing, but is being accessed in a asynchronous manner, not in a live class manner. So, I mean, digital divide is there, but we can also use it as an opportunity to create a digital union.
Oh, that's very interesting. It's literally like a Chopal digitalization, digitalization of the Chopal.
What we did,
Yes.
ma'am, so the same live lecture which the teacher is taking on Zoom, for example, how do you break it into smaller bite-sized videos and
Yeah.
send it through WhatsApp through a chatbot? Student is interacting with a bot and is getting that content. in a very asynchronous manner, whenever they are free, whenever they have a device.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, in fact. I'm glad that you're finding solutions to these issues. Dr. Batra?
Yes, I would just like to actually stress on one fact, and which is that through the early 1990s and now, we have been focusing a lot on learning outcomes. And we've forgotten that education is a process and it's all about learning experiences. Because learning outcomes do not guarantee the kind of experiences that students have, whether sitting in a higher education class or a primary school class. So, my submission is that education is not about learning outcomes. It's a much wider purpose. It has social purposes, it has cultural purposes. And teaching itself to me is a social practice which cannot be achieved through any amount of digital platforms. No doubt that technology can be very powerful and it can be used very powerfully. But to my mind, it is very useful to use technology as a supplement along with real classroom teaching, and largely for teachers. I think it's a great idea to use technology to professionally support teachers. But I'm not sure whether we can substitute the idea of learning outcomes, and shift it completely from learning experiences. Curriculum is not inside either a module or a textbook. Curriculum is co-constructed along with the students and the teachers dialoguing. So for me, teaching is social practice and curriculum is social dialogue. And let's not lose sight of that.
Absolutely, absolutely, very well said. Thank you. Well, I think the debate can go on, the dialogue can go on. Maybe we can make another day, another time to take this forward. But yes, the problem remains, there's a choice between equity or equality. What is it that we want? There will always be some of us who feel equality at any cost, but then there are others who feel yes, equity has its own virtue.
But they don't have to be pitted against each other.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And but yes, with the number of the kind of population that we have, and the other day I was reading some research paper which says that the human mind can actually think about a single issue, about a single problem in one, add 10 more zeros. Now I don't know how to say that. Maybe Nakul can translate that for me, whatever that figure is, that many ways. A single issue can be perceived in that many different ways. So yes, definitely one size can never fit all. Similarly, I think NEP 2020 also cannot fit everybody, cannot address all issues, everybody's problems. It obviously one policy cannot cater to everybody's needs. Millions of people that we have, hundreds of dialects and thousands of cultures that we are teeming with. But nevertheless, we have a starting point. At least we have a dialogue around education. I think that is the biggest takeaway from NEP 2020. We have not been talking about education with this kind of involvement, this kind of engagement for a very, very long time. Thank you so much for gracing this occasion. And as I said, I mean, there were hundreds of questions on NEP from various audience, but I hope we have managed to address most of them. But we'll have to take another day to actually just answer those questions and take every clause bit by bit. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
With this, we wind up our second webinar of the day. I express our sincere thanks to Dr. Poonam Batra, Dr. Payal Nagpal, Mr. Shashank Pandey, and Dr. Nakul Gupta for their detailed analysis of the National Education Policy. We also thank Ms. Kanika S. Govi for moderating this webinar so gracefully. Everyone is requested to fill the feedback form available in the YouTube chat and the Microsoft Teams chat as well. The third webinar begins at 12:30 p.m. So we request you all to join us by 12:25 p.m. for the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nakul. Thank you, Shashank. Shashank, I can't bring myself to say